Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Riley McManus. An 84-year-old woman has been charged with manslaughter in connection to the death of a 91-year-old man in the Bethany long-term care home back in May. The victim died as a result of injuries sustained during a fall after he and the accused became involved in a physical altercation. Ryan Benazzo has the story.
Thunder Bay police have laid manslaughter charges against 84-year-old Harriet Gray more than 2.5 months after an unidentified 91-year-old man died following an altercation inside the Bethany nursing home.
This is, in my experience, a unique investigation.
Inspector Jeremy Pearson says while criminal deaths inside seniors' homes aren't unheard of in Canada, he'd never been involved in such an investigation before. Pearson says while he can't go into detail about the incident, it was a fall that ultimately led to the victim's death.
There was an altercation between residents at the facility, resulting in a fall, which resulted in the ultimately in the death of our deceased. And for that reason, without going into further details, which will be subject to the court process.
Pearson wouldn't give specifics on why it took so long to lay charges. Gray appeared in court Tuesday morning and will appear again in 2 weeks. St. Joseph's Care Group, which owns Bethany, cooperated fully with the investigation.
We're really deeply saddened by this tragic event, and we certainly offer our sincere apologies to the family and the loved ones. What I can share is that our staff followed all required processes in responding to this incident, and we're grateful for their quick and compassionate response.
Pearson says it's unlikely that any additional charges will be laid.
This investigation is, to our minds, concluded. Of course, no investigation is ever closed completely. Should further information come forward, we will, of course, review it and consider it in the general context. But we are satisfied that as far as this particular incident goes, we have gathered the information and evidence necessary. We've laid the appropriate charge based on all the evidence that we've been able to obtain.
Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
A Kenora man wanted in connection to a murder last month in Dryden has been arrested in Winnipeg. 39-year-old Wayne Gaynor Kijik was arrested on Sunday and charged with second-degree murder in connection with the July 13th death of 28-year-old David Sinclair, who's also from Kenora. 2 people have now been arrested in connection to the crime. The other is a 22-year-old Winnipeg man. Today was the first day that parents of young children were able to get their kids vaccinated against COVID-19 without an appointment. The longtime clinic at the CLE Coliseum has closed, but walk-in clinics are popping up around the city. Today, the jab was offered at the Da Vinci Center. Jess Clement was there to find out how parents feel about the vaccine for kids 5 and under.
The pop-up COVID-19 vaccination clinic at the Da Vinci Center on Tuesday saw many parents bring in their young children for their first dose. Parents with children aged 6 months to 5 years old were able to walk in without an appointment for the pediatric Moderna vaccine, which is half the strength of that offered to older children. Parents we spoke with say they wanted to give their kids that extra layer of protection.
I think this is the new reality that we're living in. We need to adapt and give our kids the best line of defense possible. So I think it's a great idea to get the vaccination and to continue being as safe as possible so that we can continue to enjoy things.
I think it's great. We waited a long time for it, and hopefully it gives us some resemblance back to normal.
They add they aren't worried about their kids getting the jab, saying they trust the science.
I had no hesitations whatsoever. The studies so far have been good. I was vaccinated. This is my 4th dose today, and I was happy to get the kids protected in some way.
It's a little scary because they're a lot smaller, but we know it's a smaller dose, so we feel confident.
Trust the science. I trust that that the vaccine is the best line of defense as it stands, and I think that it's best to do what the health professionals are advising us to.
With the usual walk-in clinic at the CLE Coliseum being closed for the next few weeks, other public clinics will be popping up around the city, including at the CLE Heritage Building on Wednesday, the Inner City Shopping Center parking lot on Thursday, and the Italian Cultural Center next Monday. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
We now turn to the mounting concerns and calls for the province to publicly address hospital department closures in Ontario. Critics want to hear for what they are calling a staff crisis in healthcare. Siobhan Morris has the details.
Without a doubt, hospitals are challenged when they cannot fill their shifts.
Addressing the staffing crunch in an interview for the first time as health minister, Sylvia Jones says Ontario's struggles are shared.
The shortage of healthcare workers in the province of Ontario is not unique to Ontario, Canada, unfortunately the world.
Over the long weekend, the Ontario Nurses Association says their members reported scaled back care at more than 20 hospitals.
It either had to reduce capacity in their emergency departments, ICUs, ORs, beds, labor and delivery patients that have been redirected to other hospitals. It is absolutely outrageous.
With frontline workers on vacation, sick with COVID, or out of the field entirely, Jones can't say when things might improve.
We'll work through those with Ontario Health to make sure those individual hospitals have the coverage where and when they need it. But in terms of a timeline, that's very hard to monitor and judge.
The Ontario Medical Association says it all means more pressure on those still in scrubs.
Burnout is that emotional exhaustion that exists inside a system that has fractures and weighs someone down. So in the end, it definitely can impact patient care.
This is certainly a dire and a dangerous situation that needs drastic responses from our politicians.
The Registered Nurses Association says retired RNs are willing to come back to work, but need incentives.
Ready to help with mentoring our internationally educated nurses who we know we have thousands who are waiting for expediting their processes. On over 14,000 of them are ready to come on board.
Jones is highlighting jobs already added.
We have over 600 new internationally trained healthcare providers working in hospitals in Ontario that we didn't have 3 or 4 years ago. Can we do more? Absolutely, and we will do more.
Critics in healthcare and in politics say Bill 124, capping public sector wage increases, is driving people away from nursing in particular.
If you're making it unattractive for them to come and work here, because if they work in our publicly funded healthcare system, they can only get 1%, eliminating that would be a good start.
Jones says the government has recognized nurses' exceptionally hard work with retention bonuses of up to $5,000.
An area journalist has returned from a monumental assignment. Fort William First Nation member Jolene Banning was among those who covered the Pope's recent visit to Canada, during which he apologized for the church's role in this country's residential school system. Arlene Noonan spoke with Banning today about the intense and emotional trip.
Anishinaabe journalist Jolene Banning, on the right, is the field producer with the all-Indigenous crew of Tanya Talaga's upcoming documentary, The Knowing, about the history and legacy of residential schools. Banning says she witnessed a wide array of responses to the Pope's words at each stop in the 6-day trip.
It was a range of some people seeing it as a very important first step to other comments of his apology lacking, to even more comments at other events saying that it felt more like a mass as opposed to an apology.
She says the experience was intense, but that she appreciated being able to share it with her First Nations colleagues.
This work does take a toll on your emotional self and your spiritual self. But it's important work that needs to be told. Like, I need my grandchildren to grow up knowing the truth.
Banning says security and scheduling were tight on the trip, but that she was amazed by how quickly everything was organized.
When they made the call that the Pope was coming, things happened like that. So, within a week, roads got paved. So I think it just goes to show that if the government really wants to get anything done for First Nations people, they could do it in a heartbeat.
Banning says she worries the papal apology could be used as ammunition by those who say Indigenous people should get over residential schools, but she's hopeful that the message will filter down to the Christian community and that more Canadians will step up in support of Indigenous people.
My hope would be that we would have more allies, more people willing and wanting to know the truth about what happened, possibly taking up reading the TRC's whole volumes. that there's less denialism, that there's more support when we ask for things like clean drinking water.
In the end, Banning says she was left hoping that survivors will find the healing that they have wanted for so long. For survivors and their families who may be experiencing pain or distress, the Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available 24 hours a day at 1-866-925-4419. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
The cruise ship tourism may have just made its return to Thunder Bay this summer, but signs are already pointing to further growth. Tourism manager Paul Pepe says 5 cruise ship operators recently visited the city to get a better understanding of what Thunder Bay has to offer.
They're looking for the wow factor. They're looking for the topography. They're looking for the things that they know their guests can't get anywhere else in the world. And Lake Superior offers that. And so, these familiarization tours, as we call them, are an opportunity for industry partners to get a bit of a taste of what it's all about.
Pepe adds that the successful first half of the season has played a massive part in making the region so attractive to cruise liners wanting to expand to the north shores of Lake Superior. Thunder Bay has been visited 3 times this year by Viking Expeditions Viking Octantis and twice by American Queen Voyages Ocean Navigator. It's been another off year for area farmers due to the late thaw and insufficient rainfall. That's according to Lakehead University's Agriculture Research Station, which hosted its annual summer tour today. But as Mitchell Ringos tells us, it could be the last, with the facility's funding currently set to run out.
Members of the local agriculture community joined Director Tarlok Singh Sahota for a walkthrough of the many fields at the station's Little Norway Road location, which is blooming with experimental crops like anvil that delays the release of nitrogen, preserving more nutrients for crops and leaving less to run off into the environment. Sahota says growing crops has been tough this year due to a slow winter thaw and low rain totals in June and July.
June was pretty dry. Even if it rained by 1 some mm, 1.3 ml, that's hardly anything. So that's how it has been raining. Even this year, the rain is a constraint.
Over the past 4 years, the station has been funded by the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. But now, after the 5th year, that funding will now be over, which Ontario Federation of Agriculture President Peggy Breckfeld says is disappointing. But she hopes more funding will be announced, as she says the station still has a lot to offer.
The performances that they're doing here, the trials, actually work into this common goal of bettering the environment, doing more with less, and ensuring that we're feeding the soil and the crops. I think they just work into today's environment message, and I think that there's such value in that in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and even beyond.
Sahota says those looking to help fund the research station can reach out directly, as he hopes to continue the work to help area farmers. Mitchell Ringos, TBT News.
Construction on Balmoral Street is ahead of schedule, but motorists should expect closures along the major thoroughfares to continue through October. That includes a complete shutdown of the Central Avenue intersection tomorrow and Thursday. The major project involves a total rebuild, including excavation, pipe laying, and repaving. It's work that city project engineer Mike Bogreg says takes time, but he notes despite a slowdown due to some delayed pipe deliveries, things are now rolling along quite quickly.
Actually, the contractor, Bruno's, has been ripping along nicely. Probably a few weeks ahead of schedule right now. So we're hoping to keep that momentum going. The work is going very well.
The section of Balmoral from Central to Alloy is expected to reopen in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Work will then shift to the portion of the roadway between Central and Jasper. Drivers are asked to obey all posted signage in the area. A local couple is celebrating a $100,000 Encore win. Gordon and Judith Bradshaw matched the last 6 of 7 Encore numbers in exact order in the June 18th Lotto 649 draw. They bought the winning ticket at the Alloy Drive Husky station. They say they were completely shocked when they found out they'd won. The Bradshaws plan to put their winnings towards retirement, kitchen renovations, and a trip to visit family in Scotland. And that is just amazing for them. And Mitch, you know what?